And so I talked to him now because he lives in Texas, but he's in California now training for Porsche. And you know what he complains about with his program? The damn kids. He's like, these kids, Gallon. I'm like, really? Well, you talk about kids. Oh, well, this one kid. His kid's like 22 years old. I'm like, oh yeah, not like us, right, old timer? You guy's like 5 years older than them. And he's complaining about the damn kids. And he's like, I know how stupid it sounds because they're only 5 years younger than me, but I think that that's a big 5 years. Like, there's a lot that happens. Of course you think so. And then 10 years from now, you look back on it and go, man, it wasn't those 5 years. It's the 15 years since then. That's what really makes a difference. In other words, as we get older, we start to think that these things happen to come along with us just because we get older. But they don't. I'm sure some of you are more mature than your parents. Some of you, I'm sure, are less mature than your 7-year-old cousins. Some of you are have very little sense of responsibility. Some of you guys, I'm sure, guys think, oh, I don't want to call anybody out, but some of you, I look at you, I think that you look to me like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You know, some of you have seen way more, but you haven't seen everything. And you haven't seen as much as you're going to. And some of you have never seen much more than just the walk or the ride from home to school and back every day. And so wisdom is something that will come with all of this. And this becomes a very difficult thing to overcome. If you develop yourself as somebody who really is wise, and I mean really is wise, you really focus on that wisdom. And some of you, I'm sure, are that person. You don't have to raise your hand, but I wonder if any of you are that person who your friends come to for wisdom all the time. Because for some reason they think you've got some stuff figured out. There's just something about the way that you talk, the way that you carry yourself, that they just think you're wise, and maybe you're that person who people come to for advice. Some of you, hopefully, as you grow older, you become far more responsible. And I mean, like, you pick up the heaviest goddamn things that you can find in life, and you carry them forward willingly. You willingly take on responsibility, because you understand that at the end of responsibility is accomplishment and meaning and purpose. That a life without responsibility, as much as we think like, wow, that'd be so wonderful, I promise you it would not be wonderful for you. It would be terrible for you, because it would rob you of any opportunity to lead a meaningful life. You might think, like, well, you know, maybe there's another way of finding meaning in life. Turns out there's not. You know, in the fourth quarter, we're going to read an essay called "The Case for a Tragic Optimism." This guy, Viktor Frankl, who was a concentration camp survivor, he became a psychiatrist, and he writes this essay that we're going to read, and hopefully you'll remember this when we get there. But he talks about how over the course of his psychiatric practice, he had dealt with 30,000 patients who were suicidal. 30,000. He did the calculations on it. He worked in a hospital specifically for suicidal patients. And he said that the one thing that seemed to drive people towards being suicidal more than almost anything else was a lack of employment, not having a job. And so when some of you who have parents or family members or friends who are unemployed right now and they seem like they're going through a lot, I promise you they're going through more than they even show probably. Because when you don't have a routine to go to every day, even if you hate your job, it gives you an opportunity to go and do something that's meaningful. Even if you hate the job, at least it's meaningful that you're able to provide for your family. Even if you don't like the job, at least you're providing something meaningful to society, maybe. You know, even if, like, for example, thinking about the people who drive the trash trucks, people pick up the trash. Without, you might look at them and be like, oh, I'd hate that job. Go back to what Mike Rowe was saying. Our society would fall apart. We would get diseases and die by the thousands if not for those people doing that job. Do you think there's meaning and purpose in something like that? That if that person wakes up every day and just says, this sucks, I'm hauling trash, fine. The person wakes up in the morning and says, well, I'm making a decent living doing this, and if I didn't do this, if no one did this, then we'd be back in the dark ages, sharing plagues. So it is necessary to remove this trash. You know, you can find meaning, you can find that purpose, but that's picking up the responsibility and driving forward with it. So what Frankl points out is that if you take a person who's suffering this way from a lack of employment and all of the psychological things that go along with that, instead you get them to volunteer somewhere, work at the Boys and Girls Club, to come down to the school and volunteer. They don't get any money out of it, but they report completely turning around, becoming less suicidal, and actually turning their lives around. They don't have any more money, they're still hungry, they still don't have all those things, but they have a meaning and a purpose, they have a responsibility. And that's the thing that gets us up in the morning. So if we're treating someone for depression, one of the first things that we check is, what's your schedule like? Do you have a schedule, or do you just go to sleep when you want and wake up when you want? And that turns out that that's a serious issue for people. And then of course, wisdom, responsibility, and of course having a level of experience. And if you can be all of these things here, you become very difficult to overcome. But now imagine if you're this person where you've gained wisdom, you've picked up responsibility, you've taken your life seriously, and you've gained experience in your life. And then you've got some I won't even be nice, whatever. And you've got some loser with curly hair and a jacket that's 3 sizes too big and a backpack falling down his asshole, and he's like, you don't know nothing. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you can imagine how it might make this person feel. But having said that, this is so important. Wisdom is also being able to look at this person and not get angry with them, because that would be an attack on your character. I mean, an attack on your ego. Instead, just look at the person and just think like, no, I hear you, man. maybe you were the same way when you were that age. Maybe you weren't. But it's the wisdom of just knowing they think that way because they don't have these things. And you can't anger a person into having those things. You need to start being wiser. How? It takes something to get there. They said you can't wake up and have this. You can't wake up and have this. You can't wake up and have this. You have to live a life that develops these things. And the problem is that when you develop these things, a lot of times you're going to isolate yourself from everybody else. If you go off and you have experiences in life and then you come back and try to talk about it, it's going to be very difficult for people to understand what you're talking about. And so it's an ironic thing that the further along you go in your life and the more of a mountain that you make yourself, the harder it is for the hills in your life to relate to you. And unless we maintain this wisdom, it becomes difficult for the mountains to relate, for you to relate to the hills around you in your life. And you run the risk of losing these people in your life. And so we have to be careful as we become mountains. First off, we should probably endeavor to become one, but not all of us do. And some mountains, of course, become stronger and wiser than others. And some hills, of course, are taller and shorter than others. But to understand that, we shouldn't look down. From here, we certainly have no business looking down on these mountains in the life. I met a dude yesterday, man. I went to go get my hair cut, and I have this friend. She owns a salon out in La Jolla, so she cuts my hair. I used to train her in Krav Maga Jiu-Jitsu, so she cuts my hair for me. And she charges a lot, man. It's one of those places, they charge a lot for it. But she's sweet. She says, "Oh no, I will not. Just come and get your hair cut." She's French. And then I'll say, "How much?" Oh, every time I ask her, "So what I owe you?" "Oh, you don't owe me anything. You are very nice." I'm like, "Oh." She charges like $100 for a haircut, so I feel bad for her. Well, then by the same token, of course, I'd feel pissed off if I was paying $100 for this. It's like, if I had to pay $100, I would just shave it and go, screw it, save some money every year. But anyway, I met this guy, she introduced me to him, and this guy's like in his late 50s maybe, maybe early 60s. And she introduces me to him and says that he has 3 black belts in different martial arts. And she's cutting his hair, she's finishing up with him. I go, "Wow, nice to meet you." And this is a guy, and when he's talking to you, he looks at you. You know what I mean? "How are you today?" And then you're sitting there going like, is this guy studying me or does he want to fight? The answer is yes. He's just a very intense guy. And then when he leaves, she explains to me about how he's this extremely successful real estate developer. Of course, he's worth tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. And she's telling me that his wife died last year. So I'm like, oh, that's terrible. So he's probably looking for an heir, huh? Someone he can leave all that money to. And she laughs and she's like, how old is he? And I go, late 50s, early 60s? And she says, he's over 90. And I go, wait, what? And she's like, he's over 90 years old. And there's no way. This guy got out of the chair. He's a taller guy. He didn't get out of the chair. He got out of the chair. Everything went to leave. And she said that he goes and he trains martial arts 6 days a week. He trains one martial art for whatever it is, like 3 days, and another one for another 3 days. Yeah, this guy's like, and I'm like, what the hell, man? And you look at this guy and you go like, okay, so I mean, the martial arts he does, they're bullshit, whatever. But he's better prepared to defend himself than most people. Does this guy have wisdom? Oh yeah. Does this guy have experience? Oh yeah. And he's got success. He has all of these things. That guy's a hell of a mountain. And it's funny because I just thought like, you wouldn't know it from looking at the guy. And so I wonder how many times he's been looked down on by Hills, when this is a complete mountain of a man, you know? And I was giving her grief afterwards, why didn't you tell me more about him while he was here? I want to talk to him more. And of course in my head I just thought, well, why would that have even mattered? Shouldn't you just talk to him anyway? You know, then you would find out for yourself. And I got some more of this to do. I guess I got some more of this to do. So the good news is that the still is in there, which means there's a hope and opportunity to get better. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Wednesday.
Oh, it is Wednesday.